Well, even if tropical disease had some of these effects, they can't really rule out that tropical disease is still having an effect on productivity today. So they spend a large part of their paper saying, no, it's not current disease burden. It's all this stuff that happened 300 years ago. But actually, Sachs wrote a critique of their paper shortly afterwards saying, no, if you include the right measures of susceptibility to malaria today, those measures still have a lot of predictive power, even when you control for cellular mortality 300 years ago. So that's one of the key critiques. Both of these can be partially true. In reality, academics like to say, no, my theory is right and yours is wrong, but the world is a very complicated place. And very often there's a lot of things going on. And there's absolutely no reason why, even if there's some kernel of truth in AJR, why Bloom and Sachs are wrong. Even though they're debating it as if it can only be one or the other. It's a bit almost intellectually immature to say it can only be one and not the other. Oh, yeah. Huh? Mm-hmm. Kind of go through different sort of scales. That's interesting way of thinking about it. Mm-hmm. The channel's sort of a bit different. Yep, that's a good point. The scale of it or the scope of it is different. Okay, so clicker question. Let me get the clicker thing going here. Which of these two explanations do you find is probably most plausible in explaining a link between tropical disease and African development? So just let's assume there is a link. Again, A causes B. Which of these is really most plausible in your view? Bloom and Sachs, AJR, both? Neither really seems relevant to you? And let's take 1 minute and chat with your neighbor if you want to think about the view on this. Let's go till it says a minute 30. And just remember, you can change your vote. If you need to, you can change your vote. Ten more seconds. Click in, please. Okay, so let's look at what people answered. It's kind of interesting. There's a lot of kind of support for the Bloom and Sachs view, some support for the AJR view, and then a bunch of people saying both seem relevant, and some saying neither is that relevant. So that's an interesting spread there. Okay, so we already talked through it, the main argument here, and the kind of punchline of their paper is that actually this cellular mortality centuries ago can explain 3/4 of the income differences across countries. That almost seems too big, right? And this is part of the critique. Is some of these estimates are seeming plausibly large. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's not. There's an aspect of certain types of economic history work. There's certain types of work that seem very far from a sort of scientific experiment or scientific analysis. And I think the feeling or the sort of unease that you feel, like, wait a minute, we have some correlations in the data, we're going to tell the story, I'm not convinced has motivated a big thrust of recent work in development economics, which is really going to be most of the folks of this course, which is much more micro-level experimental, where we can really try to trace through the channels with a lot more confidence. And there's really it's interesting, because of this AJR paper, there's been this burst of work on economic history, really interesting economic history of developing countries. We learned a lot. There's all these different projects going on in that realm. But there's been this countervailing trend in completely the opposite direction, so it's much more micro, contemporaneous work. So development economics is sort of splintered a little bit. So we're going to turn more to that micro work by the end of lecture day, and that's going to be more the focus of this course. Okay, so again, disease leads to growth. It can either be through this residential settlement and bad institutions, or it can be through lower labor productivity, less investment, and less technology transfer. And what's kind of nice about thinking about these two channels is they do link to the economic growth theory and economic growth models we've been talking about so far, and they have implications for policy. So if we believe one story or the other, we're going to think of very different types of public policies as being important. If Bloom and Sachs are right, then what we've really got to do is deal with today's tropical disease burden. That's the key. Put in place the public health measures, drain the mosquito swamps, treat people for all these diseases, try to boost their productivity. That's one set of implications. If Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson are right, then current disease may matter a little bit, but it's not that important. The key problem are the institutions that were the legacy of these earlier historical processes. So we have to deal with reforming those unrepresentative, exploitative, oppressive institutions, and that's what's going to unleash African development. Very different implications. Yeah. To some extent, and you raise an interesting point that when Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson talk about institutions, they talk about these very broad terms in terms of just the quality of governance and protection of. The specific measure they use is protection of property rights, rule of law, those kinds of things. But people have interpreted it to be very broad. So the functioning of health institutions or public services would sort of flow from that. So that's another link between these theories. But what's really nice is, one of these views of the world on the mechanism tells a story about why we should be investing in K, or improving K, and the other one is we should be improving A. So it brings us back a bit to the growth theory we started out with a week and a half ago now. These competing perspectives have these different implications. Okay. Now the point was raised here a minute ago about how uneasy some of this analysis may make one. These broad generalizations across countries, across centuries, where it becomes very hard to know what cause and effect really are. And pinning down a mechanism seems really challenging if we're going back hundreds of years where the data availability is so limited. Even the data that they put together on cellular mortality is just very thin data. It's based on a few observations. We don't necessarily want to overinterpret those few observations. Plus, the point was raised before, if we really want to understand the mechanism, we want to get data tracing out all the links in the chain. If it really is low income leading to poor health through public service delivery, public health delivery. Let's get data on that. Let's try to measure that. So there's a sort of unease with this kind of work, and kind of related to that is this critique by David Albuy. So I mentioned this is the sort of paper that's the best known critique of AJR, and rather than getting into the econometrics and other things, he does that a little bit, but his main contribution is he went back to all those old historical sources, and he said, look, this is a paragraph in this old historian's text that AJR used to justify their assumption about settler mortality in Mali or in Senegal, etc. Well, there's an alternative interpretation of that text. And he says, if I kind of make these alternative interpretations of all these historical texts, I get different numbers for settler mortality, and when I run their regression with my settler mortality numbers, which seem kind of equally valid, or are debatable at a minimum, you don't get that strong relationship between settler mortality and current institutions anymore. He shows that the results go down towards zero. So the basic point is, if we're going to base so much on these findings, we've got to believe in the data to begin with. And if the data is contestable, debatable, and multiple interpretations, that's a problem. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of critique about the connection between capitalism and public health. Is there a sort of the fact that there were that institutions that there was an outbreak and everything? I think the reason that these studies haven't been able to help them, I think it's that's correct. It's not really the reason that we examine it.
Yeah, it's a bit related to the point before, and I think it's a valid point that if we see sort of bad health outcomes in Africa today, Bloom and Sachs are emphasizing these kind of like inherent geographic factors that are just really hard to change, and they talk about the mosquito density in Africa and the temperatures and all these climatic factors that make Africa particularly badly suited for good health. But public health measures have to matter. And in fact, there have been some economic historians that have looked back. There were a couple of episodes during the colonial period where the European imperialists actually undertook public health measures, like to try to drain mosquito swamps, these malarial swamps, and they found reductions in malaria nearby. So there are actually public health measures you could undertake if you had the resources and the institutions to do them. So you're pointing out a good point, which is these different theories interact with each other in different ways, and they can both be right to some extent. So I think that's a well taken point. Has anybody read this Albuy critique? It's a kind of interesting intellectual history. He was actually a PhD student here at Berkeley, and he wrote the first version of this critique in like 2004, 2005, and it set off this the paper only just got published because it set off this 5 or 6 year war of working papers between the two camps about every single data point in their settler mortality data, basically, where they were both going back to the sources and making these different claims about the implications of the historians. These were really kind of bitter critiques and attacks on each other, and Albuy saying these guys made up the data to find correlation, and them calling him names, and it was terrible. He was a graduate student at the time, and Ron Acemoglu is the most productive economist in the world today. So it was a little bit like David and Goliath to some extent. I mean, he is David actually, but it would be David and Acemoglu. But the published version of the paper, I think, tones down some of that rhetoric and kind of tries to focus on the substance more. And but it's been very influential. And at the development seminar on Monday this week, the presenter presented an economic history paper and talked about how because of this debate, year after year debate between Acemoglu and Albuy, they're like documenting, cross-checking, triple-checking all their historical data. They got multiple people coded and cross-coded. So these kinds of debates have actually improved the quality of data and hopefully can give us some more confidence going forward in this kind of analysis. But this has been a very influential debate in development economics in recent years.
Doesn't it help just to have someone collect the data and make a determination of how many people are having deeper who is unaware of the hypothesis of the person who's going to use the data, so they don't accidentally
Yeah.
oh, this is Florida, and we secretly know we created the higher.
Yeah. I think there may be somebody on the moon or Mars who hasn't heard of this debate in economics, so we have to find them. I think by now everybody knows, again, the AJR paper has been cited like 5,000 times. That's a pretty high citation count for a paper. So again, it's the best cited paper. So basically everybody knows about the debate, but what the journal did at the AR, both these papers are published in the American Economic Reviews, they get referees who are economic historians, they try to find people that aren't sort of seen as being in either camp, and they get them to kind of review the evidence. That's what referees do for journals, basically, is try to be impartial assessors.
I think she might be referring to having someone from the health sector who doesn't really get involved in economic debates.
Yeah, I don't know if you were talking about health data or more the historical data.
I was talking about historical actually.
I see.
That idea, you get someone who doesn't know the hypothesis. I guess that's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe undergrad, you get
I'm sure some of the undergrads in the room would just love that job. Undergrads, tell all your friends about this debate. Before it's too late, before someone comes and asks them.
But are these two arguments, in regards to impact valuation, are they being implied so that they're one position is being tackled above the other, or is it just purely?
People are doing impact evaluations. This gets to the point about the sort of thrust towards micro work to try to understand the underpinnings of both of these theories, but with very specific data, with experimental designs, which we're going to talk about in this course, different impact evaluation methods in a particular setting with credible data. The whole goal of a lot of recent empirical work in development economics has been to say understand the link between poor health and productivity, or the type of institution and the type of outcome. So this debate again has been very productive. So maybe that's a good way to turn to this other approach I'm referring to in the title there, which is to really look at data at the level of individuals, communities, and firms to try to test these theories more precisely. And actually, for problem set 1, some of the data you're going to use is going to be along these lines, understanding the link between health and education. And I'll talk a little bit in the last few minutes just to get us sort of ramped up on this. And there's this is related to the Miguel and Kramer article in the Ashraf et al. So when we think about Bloom and Sachs, or just more broadly, links between health and income, there's a lot of potential channels. We've talked about that. One plausible channel we can think of that could have a big effect is the effect going through education. So imagine when kids are young and maybe they're uniquely susceptible to some of these infectious diseases, like we talked about before. Poor health doesn't just make them weak and tired and affect their performance that day, but it affects their development. And if it affects their cognitive development or affects how much they learn in school, then it can have very persistent effects. So if we think of certain parts of childhood as periods of investment in human capital, poor health in childhood can have lingering effects on adult outcomes by affecting human capital accumulation, by affecting education. So one of the many mediating channels could be education. And this was part of the motivation of the article I wrote with Michael Kramer, was trying to get a handle on the magnitudes of these sorts of effects. Once you learn more, say, as a child, that may open up additional educational opportunities to you. Those educational opportunities or educational credentials may open up certain occupations to you. So again, there could be big differences in life outcomes for people that have more or less schooling, and poor health could be a driver of that. And the disease that we focused on in our study was one that is very widespread, but relatively understudied, and those are intestinal helminths or intestinal worm infections. So 1 out of 4 people around the world are infected with worm infections, including hookworm, roundworm, whipworm, and schistosomiasis. And these numbers add up to more than 1 in 4 of the world's population. But that's because people have multiple infections. So I could have a hookworm infection and a roundworm infection. So basically, these are worms that attach themselves to the intestinal wall, and people can have dozens or hundreds of these worm infections with many different types of worms. Should I keep going? I've talked about this before, so for me, it's just like I'm just talking about it, but it is pretty nasty. So this is the disease burden in terms of the proportion of populations, with the disease. And you can see the darker shaded areas are the ones with very high infection rates of these worm infections. And you can see there's really a lot in sub-Saharan Africa, obviously. So you see a lot of dark-colored countries here in sub-Saharan Africa, but actually they have a breakdown by province in China. This is slightly dated data, but there's still, in some of the interior provinces of China and parts of India, there's still moderate prevalence of these infections. And there used to actually be quite a bit of infection in the U.S. South, again, which is a sort of subtropical region in points. The estimate was in 1910, 40% of Southerners had hookworm. That's pretty high. So it was a major public health problem in the U.S. 100 years ago. And actually the first major campaign of the Rockefeller Foundation was mass deworming of the U.S. South starting in 1913. It went on for over a decade, this deworming project. So again, till relatively recently, there was this problem also in the U.S. And there's a bunch of consequences. You can imagine that when there are all these parasites in your intestines, it affects your absorption of nutrients. It can make you anemic. It makes people very weak. One of the telltale signs of people that have heavy infections, meaning there's a lot of worms in their intestines, is they're lethargic and weak because they're not absorbing nutrients. And there can also be immunological responses. So people that have lots of these worm infections also may not be able to fight off other infections as well. There's some studies suggesting that getting rid of worm infections actually allows people's immune systems to fight off malaria more effectively, for instance. So there could be broader health consequences from having these infections that can affect child growth. Okay, so this is an example of a health problem that can affect development, growth, and the energy you have to learn in school. So this is going to be our focus next time. And we're basically, on Tuesday, going to turn to the regressions and how we understand these impacts.